Okay, for this mock exercise, we're going to take a look at relevant information for decision making, and we're going to take a look at a question called Manly Company. And this question, we're going to take a look at a special order with some opportunity cost component to it. Okay, so let's take a look at the question. So this question, a fire recently destroyed. Let me make this thing a little bit bigger, perhaps. So a fire recently destroyed Manly's substantial portion of Manly's production capacity, and it will be many months before the capacity can be restored. During this period, the demand for the firm's product will exceed the company's ability to produce, and the per unit data, so they produce 3 products, A, B, and C, and the operating profit per product is 25, 45, and 35. Now, it says fixed cost has been allocated to the product based on direct labor hours required to produce them. The majority capacity constraint is available in the processing machine. So this is your constraint. That's the constraint resource. For each unit of product A and C requires 2 hours. So I'm going to write the words processing time right here. So this is 2 hours and 2 hours, and this one requires 3 hours. Okay, so let me make this thing a little bit bigger. Okay, so this one requires 2 hours of processing time with machine for processing the machine, and this is 3 hours. This is 2 hours. Now we need to know that because the processing machine is our constraint resource. So this is the majority, but the major capacity constraint. So that's why this is a constraint. Now, for the first part, it's asking us, part A says, if the demand for each of the product is greater than the firm's ability to meet the demand, which product should the firm produce first? If enough capacity exists to produce 2 products, which product should they be produced next? So they want to know the first and second. They want you to prioritize the product, the sequence of production. Part B says, assume that the firm has enough capacity to meet the demand of 2 products in A, the one that we identified in A. If the estimated demand of the next product to be produced exceeds the capacity by 1,000, what is the maximum amount the firm will be willing to pay to increase the capacity? So now we're saying we can only do 2, but now we want to be able to determine what is the amount that we're willing to pay to increase the capacity for that 1 extra 1,000 of the third product, the final product that we need to produce. Part C says management adopt a plan, your plan in Part A, so whatever sequencing we decided in Part A. Shortly thereafter, a strategic important customer requested the firm supply 500 of product D, a new product which has been discontinued but could be produced again if needed. Management wants to meet the customer's demand to maintain goodwill but wants to know the cost before making that decision. So this is your special order. This is the whole idea of we need to give up our existing product production cycle to meet the special order. In the past, product D is sold for 40. So this is product D. So sales price is 40 and variable cost is 22, and they've allocated fixed cost to be $4. And this requires 1 point processing time, 1.5 hours. So what is the opportunity cost of accepting this order? Okay, so before we solve this problem, we need to take a look at two technical materials. So the concept here is constraint resources. So what is a constraint resource? It's defined as a resource that has limited capabilities. So it could be a facility, i.e. we only have 1,000 square feet and we need 1,200 square feet to accept the special. That's a limited resource. Machine hours would be one. Processing machine hour time would be one. Restricts the company's ability to satisfy demands, and the company is said to have a constraint resource. Okay? Now, what's the solution? The solution is when a constraint resource exists, a company should select a product mix that maximizes the contribution margin earned. So that's what we're looking for. We want to select the maximum contribution margin earned. Now, fixed cost is irrelevant in this case. So fixed cost is not relevant. So I would put that as irrelevant. Okay? Now, a company should not necessarily promote those products that have the highest contribution, but rather it should actually promote product that has the highest contribution margin in relation to the constraint resource. That's the key. So this is what we want. We want, and this is the decision criteria, we want a highest contribution per constraint resource. Okay? Per constraint resource. We're going to actually see that in part A. When we're calculating which product, A, B, or C, we want to select first, it's not just a contribution margin, but it's going to be the contribution margin based on a constraint resource. Now, the second element of technical knowledge requires us to also understand the special order decision. So when a new customer or perhaps an existing customers may sometimes request a special order with most likely a lower price or selling price per unit, the general rule is this. We accept the order if the incremental, this is the general rule, if the incremental exceeds the incremental cost. So incremental revenue is greater than incremental cost. Okay? And of course, it's subject to qualitative consideration. Okay? So things like if we do, so let's say we currently sell a product, T-shirts for $10 to our buyers. And someone comes to us and asks us to make a T-shirt for a special event that happens to be, and they only are willing to pay $7 for the T-shirt. Well, perhaps it makes sense to accept the special order because we discover or we calculate quantitatively the incremental revenue is greater than the incremental cost. But there could be qualitative consideration that prevents us from accepting that special order. Let's say we're going to perhaps, if our regular customer finds out that we're selling those same T-shirts for $7, it could create a problem, and it could basically cannibalize our current market, our current pricing, and our regular buyers may demand selling those T-shirts for $7, not $10. So those would be qualitative consideration that we might want to look into. So if the special order replaces a portion of normal operation, then we need to calculate the opportunity cost of accepting that order. Now, what does that mean? So basically, when you get a special order, the first question you need to ask is, do you have the capacity to accept the special order? In other words, do we have the bandwidth to fulfill that order without ruining, without discriminating, without decreasing our regular customer base? If the answer is yes, then the general rule is we only accept if incremental revenue is greater than incremental cost. If the answer is no, we don't have the bandwidth and we need to give up some of our customers, regular customers' product request, then when we're pricing this special order, we need to incorporate this opportunity cost. And that opportunity cost would be the profit that we are giving up from a regular customer for accepting this order. So not only you need to look at the incremental cost, incremental revenue, less incremental cost. So that gives us incremental profit. But we also want to subtract opportunity cost, which is calculated as the profit, incremental profit given up from regular customers. Okay? Sorry, I just wanted to kind of include that in there. Okay? So that's what we're going to do to help us answer this question. So let's start by answering part A of the question. Part A says, how do we determine the ranking? Which product do we produce first? Which product is next? Okay. So because the constraint is number of processing time on machine, then we need to look at the contribution margin per unit of a constraint resource. So let's take a look at product A, B, and C. You've got sales price, and I'm going to do it per unit. Sales price for product A is 80, 95, and 70. Variable cost is 40, 30, and 25. So the contribution margin is 40, 65, and 45. So one would think that we would do B first, then C, then A, based on contribution margin. But because processing time is the constraint, we need to calculate the contribution margin per processing time. And this 40 divided by 2 gives me $20 per unit. This is 21.67. But look at product C, it's 22.50. So the ranking is going to be, we're going to rank this as 1, 2, and 3. Although you may think that we should be ranking this as 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so either way, we're going to give up A. A is the one that's not going to generate the highest, or A does not generate the highest contribution margin. Okay, so we're going to produce, the first one should be product C, then followed by product B, then product A. So let's look at part B. Part B, remember, let's look at part B again. It says, assume that the firm has enough capacity to meet the demand of 2 products identified in A. If estimated demand for the next production to be produced exceeds the capacity by 1,000, what is the maximum amount the firm will be willing to pay for the capacity? So we did A and B, B and C. So let's say we have sufficient capacity to do B and C. The additional capacity would allow the company to sell additional units of product A. Now, product A's contribution margin per constraint resource is $20. And that's what we just did, right? We calculated in part A. Assuming that we're going to assume that variable costs will remain unchanged, the company would be willing to pay, okay, for additional capacity of what? I.e., it's going to be $20 times 1,000 units times 2 hours, because we need 2 hours, right? It takes us 2 hours to do one, which is $40,000. So this is how much I am willing to pay for additional 1,000 units if I'm going to produce an excess of the capacity. It can't be 1 and 2 because we're going to assume that we're all going to get that within our production capacity. It's really the contribution margin for producing product A. Now, let's look at Part C. Part C says, now, management wants to adopt what we said was Part A, which we know that it's, in Part A, we know that we're going to do B and C. Now, this other customer is coming in, and they're going to ask us to produce product D. So product D is contribution margin. You got sales price is 40. Variable cost is 22. Contribution margin is 18. Now, keep in mind that we're not going to include fixed costs is not relevant. It's just an allocation, right? In this analysis. So we know that it's $18 is the contribution margin per unit that we're going to earn from that. Okay? Now, for each unit of D, the firm, the company, would have to forego the contribution margin of which one? The contribution margin of 1.5 hours. Okay, because it takes us 1.5 hours, right? To produce product D of the of 2167, which is product B. So that gives us 3251. Now remember, so let's come back to the question. So the management wants you to adopt that we answered for Plan A, which says that we're going to do B first, followed by C, then followed by A. And it says that the company accepted a request to supply 500 products of D, and it says that management wants to meet that request in the past, okay? And then it says it requires 1.5. What is the opportunity cost of accepting the order? So this is how much that company, for producing, for each D, they would have to forego the contribution margin of the highest one in all of the 3 products. Now, the opportunity cost for producing product D equals the 3251 minus the 18. So this is how much money I would have made, less this is how much money I'm going to make based on accepting product D is 1451 per unit. So for 500 units of this order, we're going to multiply 500 times 1451, gives me 7255. This is the opportunity cost for accepting product D. Okay? That's the opportunity cost for accepting product D. Thank you.